So you can always turn off your camera if you don't want to be recorded. You can also access the automatic captioning. To enable captioning, select live transcript along the bar at the bottom of the Zoom window, and you may need to select more as well. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the live chat, and we'll have time for Q&A so that you can raise questions either in the chat or just verbally. With that, we will now go to the land acknowledgement by Noreen and Carolyn.
Thank you very much, Marcia. My name is Noreen Hussein, and I am one of the
Sorry.
Sorry, folks. I'm going to start that again. Welcome. My name is Noreen Hussein, and I am one of the organizers of this symposium. And I'm here with my colleague, Carolyn Defrin. Together, we will be delivering today's land acknowledgements. For those of you that are not familiar with land acknowledgements, they are common in North America and in other parts of the world, and involve making a statement which recognizes the traditional territory of the indigenous peoples whose land was stolen through brute force and genocide. Land acknowledgements also involve speaking to our own roles in the ongoing process of settler colonialism. Ryerson University, the co-host of this event, is located in the city of Toronto. Ryerson is built upon the traditional lands of the Mississauga, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Huron, and many other indigenous peoples. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We all eat out of the dish, all of us that share this territory with only one spoon. That means we have to share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, which includes taking care of the land and the creatures we share with it. Ryerson University has been directly involved in settler colonialism in a number of ways. Its namesake was one of the chief architects of the residential school system, which were government-sponsored religious schools responsible for the assimilation, inhumane treatment, gross violence, murder, and cultural genocide of Indigenous children and peoples. I am a settler. My parents migrated to Canada from Pakistan, and we have all worked, lived, and relied on stolen land. I recognize that the freedoms and liberties I experience as a citizen of Canada is done at the expense of ongoing violence and erasure of Indigenous peoples, and acknowledge that immigration has been strategically utilized by British and Canadian governments of past and present as a way to ensure ongoing dispossession of the rightful owners of the land, the Indigenous peoples, and that as immigrants, my family has greatly benefited from this corrupt system.
Thank you, Noreen. My name is Carolyn. I'm currently based in the UK, and I'm speaking on behalf of today's other co-host, London South Bank University. Colonization takes shape differently here, and while it's not yet a common practice to acknowledge the extensive problematic impacts of that history in the context of academic conferences, we feel it is important to do so, especially as it relates to the focus of this week's symposium. The UK's colonization of other lands has undoubtedly played a role in the current refugee crisis. Extraction, exploitation, and economic expansion benefiting off the backs of other countries in the name of the quote-unquote empire has not only contributed to the hardships faced by the people and places in those countries, but as we see right now, when those in danger must leave their unstable homes to seek safety, the UK is manifesting a gross hypocrisy in severely limiting their welcome. This is only further bolstered today in current policy. I myself am a US and an EU citizen, and I recognize that I benefit from these identities thanks to my grandparents who left Europe between the two world wars in search of a safer life in the United States. I moved to the UK for education in 2012. I was able to obtain a Polish passport in 2015, and I just barely met the Brexit requirements to obtain my indefinite leave to remain status, purely through the luck of timing. I recognize my own freedom of movement and subsequent capacity to find home across lands is a privilege, not a basic human right. It is granted through subjective politics, which sustains hierarchies of valuing certain human lives over others. In our symposium this week, we are aiming to open up discussions across the nuanced problematics in migration histories and explore how concepts of home manifest despite or in spite of hostile environments. Turn it over to you, Elena.
Actually, it's me.
Sorry, Marcia. With grace, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Noreen and Carolyn, for those beautifully written land acknowledgements. We've got a feast of videos and images and ideas for you today, created as part of our goal to create alternative modes of research using arts-based methods. We're going to start with our London, UK team, and I'll introduce Elena first. Dr. Elena Marchevska is interested in the relationship between performance, migration, and environmental issues. She's published widely on issues of belonging, the female body, the border, and intergenerational trauma. She retrospectively and selectively writes about events that stem from or are made possible by being part of a particular cultural identity. She's Associate Professor of Performance Studies in the School of Arts and Creative Industries, London South Bank University, the school's Director of Postgraduate Researcher, and really a brilliant thinker and artist that I've been really honored to work with. So Carolyn, hand it over to you. Or sorry, Elena, I'll hand it over to you.
We have a bit of a short wiring happening tonight. It's fine. It's a long week for us. This is kind of our fourth event, isn't it? So thank you, Marussia, and thank you for this lovely introduction. So I will kind of start, I will ask Carolyn if she can kind of perhaps share the website, if that's all right, while I talk about what we did. So we conceived this project with Marussia actually in kind of 2017, isn't it, Marussia? So it has been kind of 5 years when we kind of started this, the kernel of this idea started. And we met through our university kind of exchange, and we both share kind of intergenerational migrant stories. A lot of kind of conversation happened. We kind of traveled together to Newcastle as part of for a festival called Platforma, which is organized by Counterpoint Arts, where we met our third partner, Carolyn Lynette, and kind of in a way said, oh, why we don't actually explore this further, and applied, and we're lucky to receive the Insight Development Grant. And Marussia very hard worked on that from her side, from Canada's side. So in a way that, as you know, grants take a long time to materialize. And so now I will talk a bit about what we did in the kind of in UK and what kind of started our idea and collaboration here in UK. I kind of, before I start to talk a bit about what were the results of our work, I want to give you a bit of a context, especially about the situation in UK and in Europe. You probably have seen in media and the wider cultural discourse that migrants from the global south entering UK and Europe are usually portrayed as polluted because of they can't be classified. The legal system, the legal regulation, the state, in a way, creates these politicized human beings, the citizens. And then there are these byproducts, politically unidentifiable leftovers, non-human beings, and non-citizen. And they're usually sent back and forth between sovereign states. We heard about that from different speakers over this last couple of days. They're humiliated, represented as human dirt, stateless. And they kind of almost become detritus of humanity. It's almost like leading a wasted lives. And that kind of is very much, this kind of myth is perpetuated and over-exaggerated in the popular media discourse. How unfortunately, the actual stories of what it means to traverse these borders without the right passports are rarely heard. So how to promote a narrative led by migrants? How to encounter the story of migration told from the migrants' own perspective? How migrant artists tell stories about their precarious experience of border crossing and their life after this act? And I'm very much interested in what strategies migrant artists use to claim agency and to act as citizens of their host countries. As kind of as a great example, yesterday was actually Behu's story, where he kind of really talked about kind of how he acted with agency in a very kind of contested situation. And here I want to kind of in a way really talk about something which was established by kind of sociologist and philosopher Shahram Khosravi, where he talks about kind of establishing and using autoethnographic approach to studying borders and migrants, because he says that that enables research that can explore abstract concepts of policy and law and translate them into cultural terms that are grounded in everyday life. I also want to say that this research for me is a reflection on a long kind of life journey. I was born and brought up in Yugoslavia, a country that doesn't exist anymore, exactly at the rupture in its history. And I'm part of many generations that were displaced due to kind of this conflict. So I kind of have a very embodied understanding that displacement is kind of very much experiential. In 2019, as part of this kind of project, I started to work with kind of Marussia and Caroline first, and we kind of represent Canada, UK, and Australia. And these countries, as you know, have some of the strictest migration policies in the world. For Finding Home UK, I worked with the researcher and artist Caroline Deffrin that you already heard, and the filmmaker Winston Whitter that maybe we can spotlight as well so people can see him as well, and he will talk a bit later. And our methodological approach was very much informed by actually the results of the Hostile Environment Act in UK and how it affected the life of migrants over the last 10 years. And it brought kind of huge instability in the country, which was then kind of fueled up by Brexit as well. And as a team, we felt that it's really important to address how migrant artists respond to this and how they use their creativity to criticize the hostile political climate. We engaged over a period of 18 months in dialogue with 6 other migrant artists, and we worked in a kind of non-hierarchical way, in a non-hierarchical dynamic as co-researchers and co-creators. And we really see our kind of our art-based kind of approach as an act of defining what constitutes a good citizen narrative in UK today. We created multiple films together, and kind of actually Caroline and Winston will talk more about it. But I want to kind of now talk about one of the films which we co-developed with the theater company Psych Delight. And here you can see on the website, it's under kind of staging home section. And we were very lucky to engage in a very close dialogue with this theater company, which kind of worked at that time. They worked on a show which is called Mohan and Peter. We kind of in a way tried together with them, we tried to actively resist the dominant image of migrant as an outsider without agency. And we looked at how Peter and Mohan claim agency and act as a proactive citizens. And I will show you a short clip now that will hopefully help you understand, first of all, their collaboration and friendship, and then also will depict the complexity of this multi-layered dialogue of who they are and what home can be. So thank you, Caroline, yeah. If you can kind of go to that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see everything that I'm showing right now, right? You can see the clip is up. Okay.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can. I think it was at 1:20 something.
I thought it was too, but I double checked, and maybe. Actually, I think it's a bit later. But
okay, that's
but
fine.
Let's see. And yeah, if I'm wrong, we'll go backwards. Fine. Yeah.
Yeah. What about sit down? Ah, okay, yeah, sit down. Yeah, let's hear so much. The thing is, and don't take this the wrong way, but we're in Sudan. You can just get on a plane and go there. But with the moon, you can't do that. The moon is spectacular, you know?
But Peter, I can't take the ticket and book a ticket and go to Sudan. I'm not allowed to come back to my country now. Because I'm refugee.
Yeah, sorry, man, it's, yeah, okay, yeah, let's do Sudan, let's do it.
It feels great, like, you know, it's a real privilege to know my name.
That was the clip, right? Right, Elena, yeah. Just show a little bit more of the theater.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, thank you, Caroline. That's great. And so I invite you to watch this. We'll put the kind of link so you can watch the film. It's 9 minutes. It's very actually it talks a lot about kind of how we can use humor in the darkest moments, but also it is kind of very much about this strategy to kind of resist against some of the kind of outside imposed boundaries. So now I want to invite Caroline, who worked as a kind of research associate on this project with me. And Caroline Defrin is an artist and researcher currently focused on subject matter related to migration, intergenerational connection, feminism, nature, and care. She's originally from the US and currently based in London, UK. And she just finished a PhD in collaboration with Hammersmith United Charities, which explored relationships between funders, artists, and local vulnerable communities. She's also the co-founder of Kissing Project and an original founding member of the House Theatre of Chicago. And Caroline will talk together with Winston Whitter, who is an award-winning director, cinematographer, and film editor with expert technical abilities and over 20 years of professional experience in broadcast cinema and online. His first work as a director and editor is from 1998, where he produced the acclaimed documentary feature Rolling Through the Decades, which was premiered at the BFI. And his second documentary feature, Legacy in the Dust, the Four Aces story, also premiered at the BFI in 2008 as part of the Roots and Shoots series. His latest documentary, You Can't Move History, won the Arts and Humanities Research Council Award for Best Research in Documentary at BAFTA in 2016. And we were very privileged to actually kind of have him on this team. So Caroline and Vince, I will kind of let you talk a bit about the rest of our collaboration now.
Thank you, Elena. Yeah, because of COVID, we've had sort of an extra year of working on this project, which has actually been, I think, quite a privilege, as we've all sort of recognized that it's given us a lot of time to really listen and really collaborate with so many different artists and form some really authentic relationships. And I think, Winston and I worked together during my PhD, and this is sort of a really nice project leading off of that in terms of continuing to think about. And I know, Winston, your work is all, social political issues as well, but how you sort of keep an aesthetic and artistic way of capturing these stories so that they're, as I think someone said earlier this week, that it's all the same work. It's not separated. It's not like, oh, there's the social political work and oh, there's the artistic work. I think we've really had our eye on how to keep those things together, and working with lots of different artists who are about that as well. And I know with Peter and Mohan and Sophie Bessie, who runs the theater company that produced that show, joy and laughter and comedy was a really like a way to resist sort of further marginalizing these stories. And I think, as we talked with Khaled the other night as well, he's an amazing visual and conceptual artist, and it's really important to him that, again, we don't sort of do these talking head documentaries which only kind of further box people into refugee status. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to sort of set up this one of our projects, which was called At Home, and then Winston, I know we'll kind of back and forth on it, but we started with the Peter and Mohan project, which we just showed you, and that I think was the closest to what felt like a documentary. And then and then the pandemic hit, and we had all these plans to film with other artists. But in a way, it was a gift, because then we just handed the cameras over to all of our collaborators, and including ourselves, and started to make work that felt a little bit more personal. So Winston, maybe it's worth describing like how we set up this blueprint for At Home. Basically, we were like, okay, we're doing a research project about what finding home means when you have all these different migratory histories, and then what does it mean when it's further impacted by spending all this time at home. And so we thought, let's film ourselves at home, but let's do it through the lens of either cooking, or all the walks that we've all been taking, or special domestic objects that maybe we've started to see in a new light, or appreciate more because we're seeing them more regularly, and see what that has to say about kind of our own migrant histories as well. And because all three of us have different sort of intergenerational relationships to migration as well, we thought, actually, let's make ourselves part of the research, again, as another way to resist only looking at the refugee crisis, and more looking with. So I'll hand it over to you, Winston, because I think you were so crucial in kind of how we came up with the blueprint.
Yeah. Greetings, everybody. Nice to be here with you all. Yes, the Omnibus projects, stay at home. It was, I think we were thinking about like what objects represent home. I think that was one of the ideas I think I suggested as well. I was like, you know, if we choose an object, a favorite place you like to go, a favorite meal, anything. So we decided, okay, well, let's try this out on ourselves before we then open it out to our collaborators, to see if this idea actually works during the lockdown. So that's what we did. And we you know, obviously I've got professional video camera, but I was like, no, I've got to use the phone just like everybody else, to make sure that this brief works. So that's what we did. So we got our phones, each individually went out and made our own film. So my film was about an object. So it's about a mirror that's in my bathroom in this house. And that for me was the object I chose, because this one of the first objects, visual objects I remember as a child growing up with my parents in Stamford Hill in North London. And it's like a family heirloom now. Both my parents have passed on now. So in a way, this mirror, they live on through this mirror. This mirror reflects me, reflects them, and time. So that was what I did. And literally this video, I just shot it like within, I don't know, half an hour, you know, not thinking that, yeah, we're going to be showing this to anyone or everyone. It was just going to be for us. And that was what we all did, me, Carolyn, and Elena. And then we shared the videos, and then we shared a bit more of our stories, our migrant stories. And then I went away and edited the videos, and then this is pretty much what we came up with. And then from there, we just set up a very sort of simple brief into, like, you know, using the phone, making sure it's got enough light, making sure it's on something that's not wobbling, etc., making sure that, you know, sound, you know, you record it in a quiet space. And that was it. And from there, I think it got passed around to quite a lot of the collaborators and people involved in the project. I think the first person that sent some footage back was it Caroline? Yeah. And so then and another person, Josie, as well, sent one back. And so people were basically sending in footage, and I was editing it together. So yeah, that was pretty much how that came about. And then it's really then trying to find an aesthetic that syncs them all together. And so I just sort of came up with the idea of like, well, everybody shoots on mobile phones. They all have this kind of circular, you know, beveled edge to it. So I just put that in the frame, and that was it. And that was what sewed them all together, because, you know, I really couldn't work it out, like, how am I going to connect all these films? And that's what we did. And
isn't it Vince very kind of careful actually produced this document, which now we are happy to share with everyone. Actually, it's shared on the project website, and it's kind of a set of instructions which actually really can help anyone to kind of create a short film and reflect on this. And we really invite anyone to use this. You can use it with your students, or if you work with community groups, please use it. We would be very happy for people to use this. And this was also one part of our thinking around this project of how we can kind of also create something which then can be used by other people and other makers. Yeah, sorry guys.
Yes, okay. I mean, it has been as well, because I've been doing quite a lot of filmmaking workshops, and literally, I just literally lift this brief and send it to them and maybe tweak things. So it's been very, very useful. So yeah, there's quite a few of them. Very powerful for me. They're a lovely set of films. You know, with everybody's everybody's own direction. I mean, it's everybody that made the film. I mean, all I've done is merely cut it together. And it's amazing what came back. Very powerful, all very different as well. But at the same time, all connecting, where is home? Who is home? What is home?
Yeah, I thought I would just share a little bit of Mojisola, who is a woman that we met that we would have planned to film with. And I think this is quite a good example of, she's an artist originally from Nigeria, based in Sheffield and London, and is a theater maker. And we had an amazing conversation. I think it's important to say too that we met a lot of people we planned to work with first over a meal, and food felt really important, just as a way to talk about where we were all from. I think we would have done a very documentary style thing with her, like gone to film her doing a play, sort of in the way that we had with Peter and Mohan. And then, just asking her to do this, she submitted something so beautiful. And it's even her singing at the beginning of this. Just make sure.
Home. Home is where you rest. Home is where you go after your journey, after your work. Home is where the heart is. Story behind food. When I think about food, there's a huge link with home. Where is home? What is home?
I know we're short on time, so I won't show, but do have a look at all these films. And I think, again, sort of as a mode to resist the way we think about migrants and the way we think about like where we've come from, that Elena was saying at the beginning about what the government view of that is versus what actually life day to day looks like, is much more human and much more personal and much more about art and aesthetics and ways of being in the home that are just as sort of human as anything else. So I think that this sequence of films, sort of gives us a peek into that in a really simple and creative way. And it inspired the other researchers in Australia to take part too. So we felt like that was a nice way to communicate with them too. Shall we move on to talking about Seb's film? Elena, do you want to start that one off? And
sure, yeah, I think that, we know that we only have maybe 2 more minutes, so I will just kind of very briefly say that this is probably the movie that we spent quite a lot of time kind of working on. And mainly because you all met Seb on Monday, or those of you who are with us on Monday, you met Seb. And Seb, as part of his kind of, usually after he's doing the readings, he's also doing this exercise with the audience where he explains the kind of what the process is, or he doesn't explain, he lets you figure out, and then you figure out very quickly that it's very complex and very inhuman process. But of course, it's an exercise where people put kind of paper and you have to figure it out. And we kind of pondered a long time together with Seb and between the three of us of how we can make this understandable to people and palpable to people and as well. So, and I feel that kind of actually probably Winston, together with the kind of the animator who also helped us to kind of create this, came up with some very innovative solutions. So Vince, would you like to talk a bit about your approach to this and how you kind of in a way managed to make the link between the policy and the visual?
Yeah, this was definitely a difficult film. It was a difficult session. It was very emotional, really, for me, because it's just such a terrible situation that people have to go through, all these hoops. So it's like, how do we translate that visually? So I tried quite a few different things. I tried using like sort of your regular documentary shots, using some moments from some of the Ice and Fire drama projects, like using some of the footage, and played it back to the team, and it just didn't really work. And I think it was Carolyn who really was like, oh, maybe we could do some animations, you know, and we have a colleague that we work with, Paul, who we've collaborated before. And we decided, yeah, that would be the best way to go with this, because it was so technical and it's so sort of in boxes and all this tick box stuff and that. And it's just like, how are people going to follow this? Because you couldn't just sit and watch this on video all the way through from beginning to end, because it's quite difficult. I think it's something you need to be there. So yeah, the animations, we bounced a few ideas back and forth about like the rooms, like this image here of like, you know, like where people go for their meeting with the migration officers, and the rigmarole of that. But then also the paper played a big integral part, because we looked into the paper, and then the paper sort of then became these boxes of where people are caged, and it's almost like caged hens, you know, in the situation with these detention centers. So we thought, yes, this is a great aesthetic to show that without it being too complicated and without overwhelming. And then I decided that we should, yeah, you know, some of this to highlight some of the words that have been spoken by Seb in the session, really just to highlight and to bring home what, you know, what people go through. But we went through quite a lot of different stages of development for this. This took quite a while, so probably a good 6 or 7 months. But it was worth the 6 or 7 months. I think it's like seeing it played back at the end, you know, was just like really gratifying, and made so much more sense. And I feel like now it's, you know, I mean, I know that Seb obviously has been using it as a resource tool physically, but obviously we're in a time where we're not be able to meet up so easily. So as a virtual tool now, it's great, I think, for, you know, that it can now be shared and used throughout the world, really, and also to show certain officials and policymakers as well, because I think it spells it out to them how complicated the situation is and how it needs to change. And I think by the time you get to the end of it, it's like Seb then talking about a simplified process. You know, this is what needs to happen. So at this point, we kind of blur out all the lines, we sort of rub all the lines out, get rid of it, and make things open. And yeah, and we started with water and ended with water, and it was I sort of at first didn't know why I did that, and then I realized at the end, you know, and it's like, it's what separates everybody, it's what separates the land, and also shows the journey, and it also shows the tragedies of what is going on. So I realized, yeah, that this it's very powerful, very, very powerful. I think after being there in this session, that night, I mean, I was very, very down. I mean, I was very upset, you know. So yeah, it really sort of made it literally brought it home to me, you know, like what people are going through today. And so I feel quite, you know, honored to be a part of, you know, making this clear, you know, through film, clearer to all people, you know. So.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to wrap up, it sort of comes back to time, which I think we were talking about at the beginning of like having extra time. And I think even Elena, Winston was like really fighting for like, we need visuals, and Ellen and I were like, nah, it's okay, it's good, we're done. And there were moments where you're like, God, we're still working on this, but actually it is so worth it. Again, it comes back to the value of the aesthetics and the importance of that. And we talked a lot about relationships between policy and art and what art can do. And I do think it makes it it adds a layer that is hopefully impactful, and we'll see, and we'll hopefully get to share it with lots of people. So I know our time is up. So
yeah. Thank you guys, thank you so much. And I mean, we are more than happy to talk with people about this later. If you have questions, please put your questions in the chat box. Now I would like, actually, I have the kind of pleasure to introduce the recording of our Australian partner, who unfortunately can't be here with us. Dr. Caroline Lynette, who is Associate Professor in School of Social Sciences, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at University of New South Wales. She is affiliated with the Forced Migration Research Network and is also a Senior Research Associate of UNSW Australian Human Rights Institute. And Caroline is interested in the links between art-based research and policy making, and she's the author of Art-Based Methods in Refugee Research, Creating Sanctuary. Caroline, I think you will share the video from Caroline. Thank you.
Great.
Hello, everyone. I'm Caroline Lynette from the School of Social Sciences at the University of New South Wales in Australia. I hope you've enjoyed the program so far, and I'm very pleased to be contributing to this discussion through this short video. I'm joining you today from Bedigal Land, which most of you will know as Sydney. And I recognise that as a migrant settler, I've benefited from colonisation. And so I would like to acknowledge that I live, work and play on stolen land, and I pay my respect to the traditional owners of this land, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and to the leaders past and present. I recognise that this land was never ceded, it was taken violently, and the violence continues today. This is Aboriginal land and always was and always will be. I hope that through my work, I contribute to decolonisation. I am pleased to be able to talk about Project Finding Home today and the work that we did in Australia in 2019-2020. We began field work with 4 refugee background women who were our co-researchers. So 3 of those women were involved in walking interviews in the physical setting of their neighbourhoods, and 1 co-researcher was involved in a virtual walk because of the physical distancing measures that the COVID-19 pandemic imposed upon us. So we asked the women to take us through their neighbourhoods, so including virtually on Google Maps, and to speak to the significance of different places and different relationships and how that contributed to their sense of home, their sense of well-being, and how they fit in this new environment. And we also asked the women to take or ask us to take photographs and record soundscapes of the environment. So on the project website, you will see a couple of very simple videos that bring together some images and the soundscapes. We've written about the methodology because we think that it's important to understand the ethics of walking interviews, and that's also available on the project website. We've also written a book chapter that's framed around the photographs and the women's narratives of how they felt, how they found their place in the world, in this new neighbourhood. We also co-wrote a journal article with one of the co-researchers on the concept of hosting. So even though we started the project thinking that we might interview Australian-born or Anglo-Celtic Australians about how they host new communities, we soon realised that it was in fact the women themselves who were the hosts. So when they first arrived to Australia, they were guests in other families' homes, and these families were very much from a similar cultural or linguistic background. But as soon as new families arrived after our co-researchers, they then became the hosts themselves, and they had very little to no contact at all with Australian-born citizens. So it challenged our own understanding of who is the host. We, members of our team, were all from migrant backgrounds, so we also did a lot of self-reflection about what this project and thinking about the meaning of home meant for us, especially last year, 2020, when the meaning of home became even more significant due to border closures and an inability to travel back to home countries. But what I want us to think about as an outcome of this research is perhaps one that's not necessarily a positive one, which is our failure to engage with policymakers and decision makers. So for me, that meant that I tried to use a model of what we call deliberative dialogue, which involves engaging policymakers and decision makers from the outset of the project, so that we may collaboratively develop some project aims that we could achieve through a research like this and within the resources and the parameters that we had. So what I did was to contact the local council and tried to organise a meeting to talk about the project and which direction we could potentially head into, so that there would be some use for decision makers as well. There was zero interest to engage with me, and this is not unusual. It's quite a foreign model for policy and decision makers to be asked to provide input about how a research can be useful to their own strategies in terms of homemaking, housing, social cohesion, social relations. And so there are many reasons why there are research policy gaps, resources, timing, lack of relationships. But what I would encourage academic researchers especially to consider is to think about why is it that our research doesn't have broader policy impact. There's nothing wrong with individual level or social level impact, but why is it that most of our research doesn't achieve impact at a broader level? So hoping that our academic publications might result in that kind of change as a happy coincidence is probably an outdated notion, and it's quite naive. What we do need to do is to develop solid knowledge translation plans with clear strategies on how we plan to engage and target decision makers and policy makers with the research findings, to make sure that they do actually know that excellent research is happening everywhere and that there are some practical applications that policy and decision makers could really be involved in. So that model of deliberative dialogue that I mentioned before is one such strategy. So it could take the form of organising workshops where there are actual conversations with decision makers and policy makers about what it is they're actually after, or how they can use our findings in practical ways. So all is not lost. Even if there was no interest at the beginning of the research, it doesn't mean that we can't use our findings now to start that dialogue with decision makers. Policy change takes a lot of time. It is probably one of the least explored aspects of research for social change. But I do think that it is part of our responsibility and indeed our duty to come up with better strategies to effect change at a broader level. It's been an absolute pleasure to share those thoughts with you, and I'm very happy for anyone to contact me if you have further questions about the project or anything else that I've shared with you today. And I wish you all the best. And I hope that in a not too distant future, we'll be able to perhaps meet in person. Thank you very much and all the best.
So I think that there is a provocation there from Caroline that also speaks to a lot of the kind of questions that arise around policy and how we approach policymakers. And kind of this kind of also resonates to what Onya said on day 2 about actually how do we get in the same room, how do we talk and kind of have human to human conversation. So it will be interesting to talk more about this in the kind of potential the question and answer question in the Q&A, sorry. All right, so I will go back to Marussia now, who you all met at the beginning. And as I said, we all come from very complex migrant backgrounds on this project. And Marussia is a daughter of Ukrainian immigrants and currently a professor at Ryerson University, but also a filmmaker and author. Her research is concerned with affect, memory, and archives as they relate to media, history, and nation. She currently works with LGBT asylum seekers to develop forms of pedagogy and expression that express the tension between sexual liberation and economic and racist exploitation. She's also the founding director of the Studio for Media Activism and Critical Thought at Ryerson University in Toronto. Marussia, over to you. I think you need to unmute.
Thank you, Elena. I'm going to give an overview of the work that we did in Toronto and then hand it over to my co-researchers, Flora and Noreen. 3 years ago, when Elena, Carolyn, and I launched Project Finding Home, I really had no idea of the complexity of the work that we were entering into. And from my perspective, a world and a work in which my migrant co-researchers would create wondrous affective worlds, dreamscapes, reenactments, testimonies, creating a place, as one of our participants, Ricardo, put it, that is, quote, somewhere between strange continents, end quote, a place anchored by the body, delimited by governmentality, but made boundless with the poetics of creation. With the Toronto project, I decided to focus on working with LGBTQ refugees. I'm a daughter of migrants, but I'm also queer. And one thing that I noticed early on in engaging with different discourses of migration was that the LGBTQ refugee story was often left out. And I had just made a film about internally displaced refugees in Ukraine called This is Gay Propaganda, following the sort of the roots that LGBT folks from Donbass, from East Ukraine, which is occupied by Russia, the ways in which they had to recreate their sense of home and really work through trauma and develop new forms of citizenship. It opened my eyes to the global sexual apartheid that has emerged via the rise of neoliberalism around the world. There are over 70 countries worldwide that have anti-gay laws, as well as many countries that have regional anti-gay legislation like the US and Poland. In December 2019, and I'm going to just switch to PowerPoint. So I'm going to share screen. Okay, there we go. In December 2019, I began working with Lok Chi Lam, a video maker originally from Hong Kong, to organize a series of workshops with LGBTQ plus asylum seekers affiliated with the Metropolitan Community Church. I'm in a church that supports thousands of refugees fleeing anti-gay laws around the world. In the workshop, we provided basic video recording and storytelling skills, and this resulted in a participant-directed 10-minute video that's on our website. It's called Finding Home, LGBTQ Asylum Seekers Talk About Their Lives. And this is a video that I hope will build understanding in Canada of what refugees go through. So I'm just gonna move to that video. My sharing will not be as smooth as the others. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to show a couple of minutes clip from this video.
Yeah, the first challenging was housing. I was in the shelter, but after a while, the counselors in the shelter started asking me to go and get an apartment for myself.
When I came to Canada, I stayed in shelter. And in that process, I was looking for accommodation, and it was very difficult because most of the time when you meet the landlords, when they find that you're a refugee, they don't want to give you accommodation. The moment they see that I'm a refugee and also I'm a Black person, they don't want to give me accommodation. And I remember meeting a landlord the moment I stepped my foot on the door, he didn't allow me to go in.
So, the stories that that the participants, the co-researchers, told during that film are a really important and original contribution to the body of work on refugee experience, especially in Canada, which is engaged in this sort of discursive project of moral superiority, a kind of imperialist project, really, in which it defines itself as a very liberal and tolerant country, and so grooms its citizens to have a kind of disbelief and disinterest in the actual really difficult conditions of migrants in this country. Just give me a second. And is my screen share happening? Okay, there we go. So Lokchi noted that when she arrived in Canada, she felt that many doors were closed to her, and she insisted that we hold the workshops in the professional studios at Ryerson. She said this is a way to open the door. The certificates that we provided with the Ryerson logo proved to, and we would provide these to participants at the end of the workshops, proved to be as important as anything else we supplied. Those certificates, and sometimes the videos themselves, were used in asylum hearings and helped asylum seekers to help some of the asylum seekers to make successful claims. When the workshops went online, we were also able to provide tablets to all of the participants. Yesterday when Omid Tofigian talked about the university as a colonial enterprise on a continuum with border violence, it made me think that one of the things that we can do as researchers is to extract and redistribute resources from the universities that we work in, whether they're intellectual, material, or otherwise, as a small step towards decolonization. Khaled Baraka, one of the artists from the UK project, said the other day, multiple attachments mean multiple stories. In our final workshop series led by Jorge Lozano, the stories poured forth. We worked with really minimal technical means, with cell phones like our partners in UK did, and with tablets. And those minimal means actually proved to be the most generative. Participants downloaded basic editing software onto their tablets and used tablets or cell phones to film in quarantine. I'm going to show a clip from a video by Iman Al-Balochi, whose certificate you just saw. It's called Demon, and it tells a story of trauma using self-reflexive and experimental modes of filmmaking, and just a warning that there are references to torture in the video. It's 2 minutes long.
The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded me of the worst experience in my life. And this is how it goes. Fasten your seatbelt. It's gonna be a scary ride. I used to be locked alone in a room because of my sexuality, getting punished just because I'm gay. I started hearing these voices again. Now I remember what school did I go to, what hood I grew up in. The why, the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, till I'm grabbing my hair, I'm tearing it out. Because this is driving me crazy. I can't take it anymore. I stand and I sit, but I can't sit in this prison forever. I see my demons staring at me when I'm looking at the mirror. They torture me when I'm sleeping, and no one can hear me screaming. I feel somebody's cold hand wrapping around my neck, and someone is holding me there. Doors open and closes by themselves. Books fly off the shelf. Then it got silence. Then I saw my dad shaking hand with the devil and says, "He's all yours."
So I'm gonna stop that there. You can, oh, I see you. There are some links to our videos on the chat, and they're all available on our YouTube channel. I would say that I have a lot to say about our experience, and I hear what Caroline is saying about what she called our failure to engage in policy. And I think we've had some interesting discussions about what policy, different meanings of policy in this workshop. I always think of policy as something that is part of the world we live in, whether it's the university or the community groups that we engage in. So I've seen some really interesting impacts from this project. I feel that it has helped us to, in a sense, create new neural pathways, new routes of solidarity, and that the workshops also demonstrated the intended and unintended uses to which community art can be deployed, whether it's passing on skills, opening a door into sites of higher education, providing evidence for a refugee hearing, educating the non-migrant community, and providing a sense of solace and community. And with that, I'm going to turn to Flora, who participated in, we organized 4 different workshops, and I think she participated in 3 of them. She was also a workshop assistant for our last workshop. She says of herself, "I was born on a warm, sunny day on the beautiful island of Zanzibar, Tanzania in East Africa. I went to school in the northern part of Tanzania, Kilimanjaro, and graduated in arts and tourism studies. But my love for travel has led me to the travel industry, where I began my career as a flight attendant. I migrated to Canada alone in October 2018 after LGBTQ people were arrested in Tanzania, and I left my family behind. Now I am a full-time caregiver, motivated by my love for helping people, supporting them, and putting a smile on their faces." Flora. Is Flora here? Okay. Maybe we've lost her, and we'll come back to her. And so I'll introduce Noreen Hussein next, who has been our amazing project facilitator. Noreen holds an MA in Immigration and Settlement Studies at Ryerson University. She's interested in exploring research on migration, racialization, identity formation, and religious minorities in Canada. Over the past 10 years, Noreen has worked in higher education and nonprofit industries, managing projects related to multi-platform storytelling, experiential learning, applied research, website redesign, and community building. Noreen.
Thank you very much, Marussia, and thank you also to Carolyn and Elena, our other collaborators in this project, for supporting the work that I've had the chance to do with this project. It has been an immense pleasure working with you. I just wanted to say that because we haven't had a chance to really, kind of as we get to the close of the project. I'm just going to start off this brief presentation with a bit of background and context about my involvement and role in this project, as well as sort of touching on my positionality. I came onto this 3-year project in its final year, so last fall, and I do wish now that I had the chance to be around from the very start. The experience, of course, due to the pandemic, has been a fully online one, and so that has been kind of an interesting dimension to my involvement in this project, just building brand new relationships entirely online, which is something I'm sure and imagine many folks in the audience can relate to. So going back to last fall, I had just finished my master's degree in immigration settlement studies at Ryerson. And after a very long time away from academia, when we began our collaboration in the fall of 2020. And so fresh out of this program, I was really focused on this desire to sort of realign my professional work, which for a decade, as Marussia has mentioned, had been focused in the higher education sector, sort of in admin and project management, more towards the area of migration. And so this project was the perfect fit. And during my program, although we were exposed to many qualitative research methodologies in the academic work we both studied of others and in our own research, I observed that a vast majority of them sort of, incorporated, structured and interview-based methodologies. And so arts-based and participatory research, didn't seem very common to me as methods, and I admittedly had very limited knowledge and exposure to them. And Project Finding Home changed that for me and exposed me to sort of, what I see as new or more equitable ways of knowledge creation and research. And so unlike the rest of the research collaborators in this project, I didn't get a chance to actually create a film for the project specifically, but just by way of the universe of the world. At the same time that I got involved in this project, I got selected to partake in a storytelling workshop series program, which is very similar to the workshop series that Marussia had mentioned that we organized for LGBTQ plus co-researchers. And so the workshop program that I was selected for was entitled the IM Project. And it was led by the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Migration and Integration at Ryerson University. And so the IM workshop series actually brought together a very diverse group of graduate students from across Canada to explore issues of belonging and identity in Canada, exploring what it meant for us, to be Canadian through the medium of film. And so the video that I produced through this workshop series, similar to the videos our co-researchers produced through Project Finding Home, relate in their focus on migration and of stories of migrants, but also show what can happen when you take away sort of the constraints and break down the hierarchy and allow for rich human-centric stories to be told by those who have lived experience of racialization and marginalization. I'd now like to show you my short film and just to sort of set it up, the film a bit. It is still a rough cut, just sort of still being finessed and edited, but it is called Luxury to be Complex, and it explores a years-long process I experienced as a Pakistani Canadian Muslim woman making the decision to unveil after almost 20 years of wearing the hijab. And the film speaks to a lot of themes, including some of the broader challenges and constraint that external pressures from majoritarian society around identity and veiling place on young Muslim women in terms of the lack of freedom in our decision making. And sort of in speaking to these external pressures through personal storytelling, I think my story subtly touches on the dangers of this post 9/11 Islamophobic rhetoric and discourses of the veil, which really seek to deny the agency of Muslim women and often blame barbaric Muslim men for their oppression of us. In the broader international context of migration and what's referred to as a refugee crisis, the dehumanization of people of color and Muslim identified folks is really built on damaging misrepresentations and ideas about a monolithic Muslim culture. And Carolyn, if you don't mind sort of sharing the video since you have been doing this, my colleague's gonna. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I think as every young adult goes through, a lot of questioning, a lot of existential crises, of trying to figure out who you are and what you stand for and what you believe in. And I similarly, went through that process, and I think I got to a point where I started feeling like I was always so committed to living, my life authentically, in a way where my values are aligned with my practices, and not just in a religious sense, but just overall as a person. And I think it got to a point where I felt like, continuing to wear the hijab didn't necessarily align with, how I wanted to be, where I was headed. And so it took me a number of years to sort of like process that idea. I had worn the headscarf for since I was a child, for decades. And so the thought of like separating from a very familiar and safe and comforting practice, was very frightening. And there's a whole sort of emotional, spiritual, mental kind of journey that I went on to kind of arrive at the decision to stop veiling. And it really, it was 2016, my work contract was about to end that year, and I was kind of thinking, maybe the summertime would bring about a fresh start. Unfortunately, in the spring, we found out that my father had terminal cancer. And, that for anybody, getting a diagnosis for, somebody that you love or a parent is, it's devastating, in ways that words can't capture. We had been driving together, we went somewhere, and I remember telling him, I'm like, Dad, I don't think the headscarf or the hijab really doesn't reflect my vibe anymore, what do you think about that, and he said to me that, in life, you just have to do what makes you happy. My story is about finding liberation and making my own choices and, making decisions that reflect, my own journey towards authenticity, and sort of how losing a parent and the grief around that, changes your perspective about, really challenging decisions in your life and how you identify yourself, it's just so important to see humans in the totality of who they are. And unfortunately, one of the things that happens is that we lose, as racialized folks, the luxury to even be complex. And that's fucked up.
Thank you, Noreen.
Sorry, Marcia, I just have some closing comments. Although that was kind of it could have been a nice ending. And so just to sort of wrap up, some of the intersections and parallels between this film and the films our co-researchers produced, I think are many, and the videos are all available on our YouTube channel. And, we've provided a link in the chat, and I really urge you to sort of view them for the rich narratives and counter narratives that they present, which I think are extremely timely, given sort of what's going around the world with border violence and the refugee crisis. And I think what those videos and mine and all of the videos sort of in our project really highlight and speak to ultimately, is that there are some really grave dangers of misrepresentation, of being intentionally and widely misunderstood, of having somebody else tell our stories, and the dehumanization which often accompanies this. And so as I reflect on the close of this project, I do see a lot of benefits and power in arts-based and participatory research creation methods, conclusions that have sort of come to me both through my work in managing this project, through my education and through my involvement in my own media storytelling workshop series. And so some of these conclusions relate to the beauty and richness of stories and storytelling and experiences that can come out of empowering a traditional research subject with the skills needed to tell their own stories and creating the conditions for that to happen rather than placing constraints on that process. And this of course allows it to develop more organically. And I think what you get out of that is a richer story that has great depth and vulnerability. I think this type of collaborative research where the subject moves into the role as co-researcher also disrupts the hierarchies which exist between researcher and subjects, and also which exist around knowledge creation itself. It speaks to questions such as who gets to create knowledge and what does that process even look like? What could it look like? And so for those of you who were at the keynote presentation yesterday, one of our speakers, scholar Dr. Omid Tofirian, kind of spoke about the importance of counteracting the hierarchy of settler colonialism and neoliberalism that is so deeply entrenched in our norms everywhere, but importantly within educational institutions. And I do believe that this type of research and methods are one way to counteract and have a potential to disrupt settler, colonial, and capitalist tendencies, norms, and practices, which we have all admittedly internalized, often without questioning or challenging them. And so it's kind of my hope as I sort of move forward beyond this project in my PhD studies in sociology at York in the fall, that I'm going to have the opportunity to sort of continue exploring arts-based participatory research creation methods in my work, and, you know, to explore the stories, lives, and experiences of Muslim identifying women in Canada, navigating faith, negotiating identity, and just being, not necessarily as counter narrative, but just as narrative. And anyways, I'm very grateful for my involvement in this project, for how it has shaped my research inclinations and reinforced the importance of centering marginalized voices, but supporting them in that process to sort of both find and tap into their voice and knowledge, and sharing that with people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noreen. I can't wait to see the finished video. Okay, Flora is back. Flora Moshoqueva, who is part of our Toronto team. I hand the mic over to you.
Hi, my name is Flora Moshoqueva. I'm from Tanzania in East Africa. I came to Canada in October 2018. I have attended 3 Finding Home workshops since 2019. And what I have learned in these 3 workshops is self-identification. I could never believe by just taking a photo, creating a video, and make a story about my own life. I realized there is a lot of me than I knew before. I came aware of my sexual orientation by not only by just saying that I'm a LGBTQ, I'm a member of LGBTQ, I am this, I'm that, but by these videos and attending this workshop, I knew a lot about my sexual orientation. And also I happened to meet a lot of LGBTQ refugee seekers from different parts of the world who came here to Canada and struggling to find a place where they can call home, a place where they can be accepted for who they are. But that is a challenge. But all I can say, in the past 2 workshops we've done, it was one-on-one workshop. So it was fun. You meet people live, you talk, you chat, we work in a groups, we use equipment. In the past 2 months workshop, it was not like that. We were not able to use equipment. We were online. And that was a problem for some of the participants because they have to use their phone. We have to use our phone in creating our videos and do the work and representing, and at the same time being on the Zoom. So it was kind of challenge, but it was a very good workshop. And I'm grateful I was part of that. Also, I can say LGBTQ plus refugee here in Canada still experiences stigma, discrimination, and we are the target for sexual and physical assault, harassment, and also we are going through hate crime here in Canada, in this land. Although Canada is internationally recognized as one of the safest nations in the world for LGBTQ people, but Canada still has a lot of work to do in making sure us, LGBTQ plus refugees who come here, feel safe, that we feel that we are welcome in this land without experiencing any other form of marginalization such as racism, sexism, poverty, or any other factors alongside transphobia, homophobia that at the end impact on our mental health. But for today, what I can say, I'm glad I was part of this project, Finding Home project. This project plays a very big role in my recent court hearing. The judge was very impressed that I was part of this project, and I got accepted right away. And through Finding Home project, right now I can say I'm proud I found my home. Thank you.
Flora, that was beautiful, and congratulations. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you.
To hear that news. I think that it's amazing also to hear from you as kind of one of the participants in the workshop on the Canadian side. And I'm just kind of also also curious about what comes next, Flora. What are your plans? What where next?
What's next for me right now is go ahead and apply for my permanent resident card and still be involved with many LGBTQ groups, raising my voice, still want to help other refugee seekers who came here to Canada, help them to find a land like me. I've already found a land.
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah. It just talks about that kind of, in a way, being at home, in a way, kind of what it means, and to hear it from you, it just kind of talks also about the complexity of searching for that and finding it eventually. So I would like to now maybe invite any questions. I know I'm really pleased actually to see quite a lot of people who have been here with us for all the 4 days. And I'm really grateful for you sticking with us and kind of listening to different speakers that we invited to be with us. So if you have any questions for us, for the team, or for any of our collaborators, we would be really welcome your feedback on anything. You can either write a question in the chat or you can raise your hand. It will be great to hear from you, especially from people that are here with us for a couple of days as well. I don't think we maybe concluded or have any black and white answers, especially not around policy. As you saw, it's very complex. And I think that we definitely feel that that is something which we are still, as project team, still figuring out. Yeah, any questions?
I wonder if anyone sort of on our
I think there is a question. Mauricio, sorry. Shall I read it? Thank you, Alison. Alison said, it has been fascinating to find out what you've done. And I guess one question might be, what next? Shall I talk a bit about the we had, just before the pandemic struck, in a way, we wanted, and one of our partner on this project in UK was Counterpoint Arts, and you also, Onya, when on day 2. And we are currently looking at how we can present some of this work for Refugee Week, of course, in June, but also for the next platform, which is in York. We always actually, as a team, isn't it, Vince and Caroline can talk about this, but we particularly wanted to, a lot of these films are very embodied and come from a very personal perspective. And we wanted to in a way, embody them in the space and allow the audience to travel between these different stories. So that's one thing which that's our hopeful thinking, that we can also as artists as well experiment a bit with these films.
Yeah, I think I'm quite inspired by the conversations that have happened throughout the week in terms of this policy. And I'm so glad that Caroline brought this up in her video about the problem of the gap between policy. And I think the other night when we talked with Onya, she said, I can't remember who said it, was like somewhere between her and Khaled, just saying, how can we get in the room with policymakers, and how can we sort of use artistic practice as a way to humanize everyone, not just the migrant experience, but the policymaker experience as well, because they are human beings too. And so I'm really curious if we can, show these films more, get in rooms more together with not necessarily like-minded people around this, and sort of use that as a way to start dialogue and ask where people are coming from.
I think, I sort of alluded to this before, but I think that, policy exists in organizations, it exists in universities. So we don't have to think of policy as just something that is governmental. I think having our media storytelling workshops at Ryerson had ripple effects. The students that the student volunteers that were involved, my department chair who saw, who heard about the workshops and then offered to a little bit of funding to help pay the artists who were leading the workshops. I work on the board of a queer theater, and doing this work with LGBTQ plus refugees has sort of emboldened me to speak up more at the queer theater about the importance of bringing migrant voices to the stage. And I was so inspired by Seb's work and would really love to bring him here with that work. So yeah, so I'm really interested in those kind of ripple effects that happen that do start to subtly change community and institutional policies.
Yeah, it feels like there's such a spectrum of what policy means, and even listening, Flora, to what you're saying about finding home kind of then further impacts how you help other people find home. And I know a lot of Khaled's work is about that too, of like, I'm not going to try to fix the big monumental government thing. I'm just going to start doing something different over here. And so if I can work on in a way, that's a kind of policy, is just creating those paths for other people. So that yeah, there's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, creativity can inspire policy, can't it? So it's echoing your vibration of the work you're doing. And it's just people seeing it and catching on. So it's just like anything that happens, it spreads. People then start to say, oh, I've just seen this thing, I was part of this project, and it's really important. I know this councillor or that person, I'm going to forward this film to them. You got to sit and watch it. And that's how these connections, it's just like how we connect with each other as people and projects, and how things come about, and the word gets to you, and then you get on it, and then the word that you've got, then you pass on to someone else, because you just like, I highly recommend this project. So it's a ripple effect. It will take time. This is a thing, it may not happen overnight as we would wish, but we'll push as hard as we can to make things move as fast as they can. So it's all I can say is keep on keeping on with all of the work that we're all doing, and keep that ripple effect going until you get the right ear in the room, and then that right ear in the room is just gonna then hopefully give you the keys to the next room, and then we can then have a further discussion. But I definitely would say that it feels like we need to have more solutions at the ready. Definitely we need to have like, okay, when we do get that opportunity to have the conversations with people, it's like, okay, well, these are some like ideas for policies that I feel could work. This is what the people feel can work. So
yeah, thank you, Vince. And I think that, I think that especially for me and Winston, when we worked with Seb, both me and Winston actually as migrants have had actually quite uncomfortable experiences being detained and being kept in detention for kind of both of us for different reasons, but mainly because in Winston's case, because kind of wrong paperwork, and in my case, just because I hold a wrong passport, I have a wrong nationality in a way. And I think that that kind of for us in a way amplified that what happened to us like maybe 10 years ago, now that it's even worse. It's even worse how people are treated, and that actually can happen to us again. And it felt very personal after that workshop with Seb. And actually for me as a researcher, that this project particularly empowered me to talk about that in a kind of academic context, because I feel that also in an academic context, we don't talk so much about that. A lot of researchers actually don't, there is this assumption that researchers come from very kind of affluent background, that they kind of have, that they all come that they're all kind of very kind of privileged. But I also kind of during this project, actually, I was going through a very precarious stage where I was kind of just applying after kind of almost 12 years of living here in UK, just applying for my kind of permanent residency. And you can see even in my life that 12 years, it took me 12 years to live in this country to get to get a permanent status. So you just kind of see how all these procedures are extended, and how in a way universities and institutions are complacent in that. It was 12 years because actually 4 years I spent as a student in UK, and then I worked as a kind of researcher, and then I had a kind of a post. So that kind of in a way all add up to 12 years, because the 4 years as a student doesn't count in UK. So it doesn't count towards citizenship. And in a way that kind of shows, very much exposes how the universities also prop this system, which kind of yesterday was very eloquently discussed, how in a way all these institutions, universities, hospitals, they become extended hand of these awful government policies, and that we really need to kind of speak about that and challenge that, and which kind of in a way in UK became very evident after the Windrush scandal, where people who had lived here for 40, 50 years were made kind of non-citizens overnight. And I think that we just kind of really, it's kind of really complex. So I think that's kind of probably something else that I would like to take even further in my academic work. But I can see very kind of a lot of people are saying thank you. I know we are approaching the end. I don't know, maybe we can all, is anyone else want to say something before we close this? I mean, from our team, or maybe someone from the audience. I see a lot of thank yous, but any final
I just want to say a huge shout out to Noreen, because this literally would not have happened if not for her efforts. So thank you, Noreen, for all that you did.
Thank you,
Noreen.
Thanks, guys.
It's been a really rich experience to hear about, even though Elena and I have been working together for several years, it was really nice today to get a sense of the texture and the detail of your work, and the collaboration and the centrality of food really speaks to my heart. And also to see the continuities between your work and the work that we were doing here, whether it's Seb's work with LGBTQ refugees in UK, but also, with the video that you made with Seb, Winston, that description of the waiting, the obstacles, the long years of waiting to be accepted by a country, very much echoed, right, Flora, the stories that came up in our project. And yeah, I wonder for you, Flora, how those years of waiting and applying and so on affected your own view, not just of yourself, but of Canada. Question, but Flora, I'm asking you, like, just how your experience, that long experience of waiting to be accepted as a refugee, how that impacted your sense of Canada, where you live.
This actually compared to the USA, I think Canada has not a very long time of waiting, because it's been like almost 3 years for me, and I'm already accepted and I can apply for permanent residence. So I'm grateful. It does not seem that long, but it's long to be away from your family, from your loved one. But I'm grateful it's not that long period of time.
So glad that it worked out in the end.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that there are some lovely messages here, and lots of gratitude and thank you, and also thank you from us for all kind of participants who came and shared their time and knowledge with us. There is a lot around the ethics of care, and I'm glad that kind of we really started, and hopefully we will finish this project with kind of we try to care for each other and for the people that surround you. So it's around us. So I'm glad that kind of reads in the room.
We should also say that we are putting together a catalog of the videos that have been created with some essays and writings and excerpts of things that people have said at this event. So we will send out information about that to everyone who registered for this symposium. Keep an eye out for that.
I have a question for you, Marissa. I think it would be great if we could continue, you know, the omnibus films that we created here in the UK and across. It would be great to keep that open for people to submit work. But I guess they'd have to edit it as well and submit it. But I think it'd be quite nice. I mean, I don't know if that's something you thought about, continuing the work in that way in video. People, you know, talking about what home means to them. So just to keep going with that essay, that cataloging, and I guess it can go into other mediums as well, writing, etc. But you have any plans like that?
Yeah, I mean, the project sort of ends technically at the end of May, but I really love doing these online workshops, and I love the template that you created. So well, maybe let's keep talking and see if we can do some kind of, you know, intercontinental collaboration.
Yeah, as it's been.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Thank you, everyone. So as the time is not on our side, I wish you all a good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you again for being with us. It has been a long but fruitful week. Enjoy your extended weekend if you're in UK, and hope to see you all somewhere soon. Bye.